And we will, so we will be recording Dr. Diaz's talk. The audience will not appear in the presentation, I guess, until the Q&A. And so that brings me to my other announcement, which is that we will have a Q&A period at the end of the talk. If questions arise for you throughout her talk, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will collect them and come back to them later. Otherwise, we can use the chat, and I think we could also just unmute at the end to ask questions, but we will save those all for the end. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Paula Dias. Paula is a qualitative researcher at the American Institutes for Research, working primarily on research and evaluation in international development. She holds a PhD in anthropology from Brown University, as well as a bachelor's degree from Indiana University, I believe also in anthropology. And so in her role at AIR, she leads and contributes to a variety of program evaluations in the areas of social protection, education, early childhood development, and energy development, working for clients including UNICEF, USAID, Save the Children. Most of her evaluation work has focused on sub-Saharan Africa, but her experience also includes South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Europe. And in her role of qualitative researcher, Dr. Dias leads and contributes to the design and implementation of mixed methods research studies. She trains and oversees data collection teams, and she authors a variety of research products, including evaluation reports and policy briefs. So I'm going to turn it over to Paula, who's going to tell us a lot more about what that all entails. So Paula, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cohen. Can everyone still see my screen, or is that out now? Yes? Okay, great. You can see it? There you go. Wonderful. And I can see the audience. Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for having me today. And thanks, Dr. Cohen, for the invitation. I'm very happy to be able to talk to you about my work. As Dr. Cohen mentioned, I am an IU alum and am very, very happy to be engaged with the community at IU again. And I'm currently based in Bloomington, so I'm pretty close by to you guys. So I'll just get started. So the agenda for today, what we're going to talk about. So I wanted to start off the session learning a little bit about you, the audience, in terms of your goals and expectations for this session. So I'll have a quick poll to get some information from you. Then I will talk about international development at the American Institutes for Research, or AIR, and the kind of work that we do. Then I'll focus a little bit on my current position at AIR and my career trajectory, sort of how I got to where I am today and what skills I, leveraged to get where I am. Then I'll focus a bit on the kinds of writing that we do in research and evaluation, specifically within the field of international development, and show you some examples of writing products and also some of the practices that we have in terms of quality control and all of that. And then I'll end with just, a few career resources in case you're interested in, pursuing a career in international development in the future. And then I will leave time for Q&A at the end. And I try to keep the presentation short so that we have more time for discussion, so we can hear, your questions and respond to your questions. Okay, so I have a couple of questions for you in a poll with the link here on this slide. So basically, I want to find out about your major and also what you hope to learn from this session, to just learn a little bit more about you. So if everyone could follow the link here, either on your computer or on your phone, and answer those two questions. I believe the poll is already activated, but let me know if you are having trouble accessing this. I'll just wait a couple of minutes for people to contribute. I'm just switching over my display here to show some of the responses that I'm getting. So a lot of people in international studies in terms of the major, comparative education and development, international law, anthropology and geography, great. Great, so a lot of international study focus, but some other areas as well. Okay. Okay, writing for a career, how I got involved in international development, what the career at AIR looks like. Okay, professional research writing, skills for a career in international development, how to conduct international social research, and writing sample. Okay. What your role entails, skills, okay. How to translate academic skills for sectors outside of academia. Okay, I have some experience with that. Great. Okay. Okay, great. So I think I have, that gave me a good idea of what you guys are interested in. Let me switch over here. Back to my previous screen. There we go. All right. Can everyone see my screen?
Paula, we're still seeing the poll everywhere screen.
Okay. Is that better?
Yep, now it's back.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. Okay. Oh, oops. Okay. So let's start with a little bit about AIR. So AIR, where I work currently, it's a nonpartisan, not-for-profit organization that conducts behavioral and social science research and delivers technical assistance across the US and the world. So AIR, the mission of the organization is to generate and use rigorous evidence that contributes to a better, more equitable world. So, essentially to produce research and technical assistance that will improve, the world in some aspect. And there's been a recent focus by AIR on equity, the question of equity. Specifically, they have a new equity initiative that they're investing like $100 million on research on equity and initiatives around equity. So that's a big focus of the organization today. I work in the International Development Division of AIR, but AIR has a series of domestic divisions, including, in health, education, and workforce. And they're really well known for their work domestically. Of course, it's American Institutes for Research, so it sounds, really like more of a domestic organization, but they really have, a lot. They're well known for work in education. They, I think, have contracts with several states. They used to do like big assessments for states in the realm of education. So they have a lot of other work that they do that's very interesting. International development is like used to be kind of a smaller division of AIR, but our team has grown considerably in the past couple of years. AIR has acquired 2 different organizations that had previous international development work. That includes Impact and Chemetrica. So our international development team like tripled over the past couple of years. So it's becoming sort of a bigger division within AIR. And then what our team, our International Development Division at AIR does, we do different kinds of work related to international development. Some of it is research and evaluation, which is primarily what I've done in my career. We also do technical assistance and also collaborating, learning, and adapting, or CLA, which is an approach that is kind of a more iterative approach to learning within development interventions. That includes designing, more collaborative intervention designs that allow for continuous learning and improvement of interventions, that USAID is really into this idea. So we have people also now on our team doing this kind of approach. So I'll talk a bit more about research and evaluations. This is what primarily I do. So research and evaluation is essentially, studies about development interventions that provide governments and international aid agencies with the kind of expertise and information and tools that they need to measure the effectiveness of their programs, also understand, the impacts of their programs, and especially from the qualitative side, to understand how these interventions are being implemented. So it's not only enough to understand like if your program is having an impact, but why, why is it not having an impact? For example, how is the implementation affecting the kind of outcomes you're seeing, right? So what we do on the qualitative side is really about the process and how things are implemented and why we see certain impacts on the quantitative side. So I work on, as Dr. Cohen mentioned in the introduction, I work on a lot of mixed methods evaluations, which means that I'm working as a qualitative researcher alongside quantitative researchers, often economists or subject matter experts, to try to understand, an intervention from kind of these different methodological perspectives. Our team at AIR has many different topics of expertise. We have people working on agriculture, food security, and nutrition. We have people working on gender equality. Education is a big focus, since AIR also has that focus domestically. Within the international development space, we have a lot of experience in the education sector. Also, early childhood development is something that's growing, and I've worked on a few projects related to this. Health and social protection is another. I'm currently working on a lot of social protection programs, program evaluations that are usually cash transfer evaluations, and they usually have links to other areas. So a lot of the cash transfer programs we see have, a child protection component, or they have a health and nutrition component, right? So in that way, you kind of get plugged into all of these different topics. Also, reading and literacy is a big area in our international development team. We have a couple of experts on literacy in multilingual environments. So how do you teach literacy when, the students have a different home language than the official school language? And then also we have experience in refugees and migrant issues, including education and emergencies, and all of that. In terms of regional expertise, we have a lot of work in sub-Saharan Africa, also South and Southeast Asia, Latin America, and the Caribbean, with a specific focus on Central America, and Eastern Europe as well. And we've worked for a multitude of clients, USAID, UNICEF. I personally have worked a lot with UNICEF in different countries. We also work with the Millennium Challenge Corporation, or MCC, Save the Children, the World Bank, and then now increasingly we're working with foundations as well, such as the Gates Foundation. So my role at AIR, I'm a qualitative researcher. I mentioned that I work, in project teams alongside quantitative researchers and support staff, and also subject matter experts. My job responsibilities include sort of leading and contributing to a variety of projects. So this project work includes research design, proposal writing, a lot of project management, especially if you're leading the project, training enumerators, which essentially means, training data collection staff, overseeing data collection, analyzing research results, and then writing the research reports and dissemination materials after we have the data, right? Essentially, we're working in a model that includes, like, we're designing research. We often hire data collection firms in country, in the places where we work, to collect the data, both because we don't necessarily have the availability to collect all the data ourselves, and because often the language that you need to speak to be able to collect that data, we don't speak those languages, right? It's often local languages, not even like the colonizer language, let's say, in some cases in different countries in Africa, right? So we need those local partners to be able to collect the data and also, bring their contextual knowledge, in order to be able to extract the best data possible. Outside of COVID times, the job usually includes travel to research sites for client meetings or data collection training and piloting of research tools. That is, trying out research instruments on the ground to see how well they work and tweaking them depending on, how well they're working, and also dissemination activities, which often include presenting to government stakeholders and other, NGO stakeholders in the places where these programs are being implemented. And this is just, this is a very far away picture. I couldn't find something that depicts kind of what I do very well, but this is me presenting to government and civil society stakeholders in Zambia about an evaluation that we did of an early childhood development in Zambia and parenting, traditional parenting in Zambia. In terms of my career trajectory, I am an IU alum. I got my bachelor's degree in anthropology and French at IU. So I've been sort of where you are today. At the time, there wasn't the Center for Global Studies. It wasn't founded yet, so it was a while ago. But the way that I got to, how I got to where I am today was basically, during undergrad, I had the opportunity to be engaged in research from very early on. I always worked with research. I worked at a research center at IU. I was able to get field experience pretty early on. And I did research in Brazil at the time, and it really opened my eyes to how much I enjoyed being part of research teams and how much I enjoyed research in general. I'm originally from Brazil, so I got to use Portuguese. I got to go back to Brazil to see people whose lives were very different from my own, whose experiences were different from my own. And I just love that. So I wanted to be engaged in research going forward. I graduated in 2009 in the middle of the financial crisis, so there weren't a lot of jobs at the time. And grad school really seemed like a way to sort of keep on doing research, keep on being involved with Brazil, and also to hide, for a number of years while the country got over the financial crisis, the world got over the financial crisis. So that's what I did. I went to Brown University for my PhD in anthropology. As you may know from if you're in grad school or know people who are in grad school for their PhDs, it can take a long time to get your PhD. In my case, it took a few years. So I was there, but I had the opportunity to really get really good high-level training on research methods, to think critically about research, to think critically about the world, and really develop those analytical and critical thinking skills that are so important for work, in research. So I had the privilege of having all of those years of training, and then also having fieldwork experience. So I spent like a year in the field doing ethnographic fieldwork. My dissertation was an ethnographic study of identity and race in Brazil in communities that were affected by oil extraction. So, I had that experience sort of in my backpack when I was out looking for jobs, in international development. So it just so happened that my PhD dissertation topic was on the international development, because it was about oil extraction. It was kind of not necessarily international development in the sense of like NGOs doing programming, but it was about development. It was about, communities impacted by like extraction and how they were involved in these kind of corporate social responsibility projects. And so it was really about the relationship between local communities and the oil industry, and how development was kind of conceptualized and negotiated between these different actors in Brazil. So when I got to the point where I was finishing up my PhD, I think, aside from the fact that like the academic job market is really difficult, I was already married and had a child, and I just couldn't be as flexible about where I wanted to live, where I got a job. I think something that I realized along the way too, especially within anthropology, is that academic research can often feel like you're talking kind of to your bubble. And so, you're talking to other anthropologists, you're talking to other people who work on the specific topic, or you're talking to students, but you're not really talking beyond your bubble a lot. I think it's, very few academics that can actually break through that bubble and have more of a public impact. So I was trying to look for jobs. I was considering jobs outside of academia, partly because I wanted to work with research that had more of an impact in the world, that was more readily available for people to use to make decisions, right? And so it got to a point where for family reasons, we were moving to the DC region, and I decided I was going to get a job in DC. And DC has a lot of these kinds of organizations that are doing research for the consumption of policymakers, right, and the nonprofit world, et cetera. And I heard about AIR from a friend, a colleague from grad school, who was a sociologist and who had already gotten a job in international development at AIR. And so that really helped because I had that connection. I knew kind of what the team was doing. And so that's how I got the job at AIR. And that was, I think, 2018. So I've been there for like 3.5 years now. So that's where I got to where I am. But I think the arc what I wanted to sort of illustrate through talking about this trajectory is that I think, I really liked research. That was what was driving me to grad school and what still I do in my job. International development was the topic of my dissertation. So I had some sort of subject matter expertise in that. And also something that I didn't mention up to now is that, I hadn't used French for many years. By the time that I started the job at AIR, I studied as a French major, so I was a double major in undergrad. I did a year abroad in France, and then never used French again until I got to my current job. And now I lead multiple meetings in French every week. I work with clients in Madagascar a lot. So, those kinds of skills, like foreign language skills, can really help. I also use Portuguese, which is my native language, so it's not as difficult for me, but I also use Portuguese a lot in my job because we work with Mozambique a lot. So those foreign language skills can really come in handy if you want to work in a job in a position like this. Here I wanted to give you a sense of how we use writing in different parts of the job. Working in research and evaluation, we work with a project cycle, right? So each of us are working in multiple projects that are usually evaluations of programs that are ongoing. So the project cycle includes business development, which is the stage where you're writing proposals and trying to win work from these organizations, to the contract award and implementation, in which you've won the contract and now you're carrying out the study. You design the study at the business development stage, but then at the contract and implementation stage, you're really fine-tuning the study and really carrying it out. And then after you collect data, you have the reporting and dissemination stage, in which you're producing these research products that are really writing intensive, and you're also disseminating those results through different media. So one thing I should note is that with research and evaluation, a lot of these donors and funders like UNICEF or World Bank or USAID or anyone who's funding international development interventions around the world, nowadays everyone earmarks a certain amount of funds to evaluation, usually because funders want to know whether the interventions that they're to what extent the interventions that they're investing in have impacts and are effective. They also want to learn what's working and what's not working in those interventions so that they can improve those. And so there's this whole body of evidence in terms of what works, right, about in different sectors of international development. And so there is this push to evaluate these programs, to learn from these programs, and to accumulate knowledge so that future programs will be better and more effective. So this is what we're talking about here. So in the business development stage, you're writing proposals, someone is, starting an intervention, starting to implement an intervention. They have funds for the evaluation. They're going to put out a terms of reference asking for firms to, pitch different ideas about the different study ideas for the evaluation. We do research design, we write proposals. And so that's at the first stage where where writing kind of comes into the process. And we also develop budgets. So at the proposal writing stage, it's really strategic writing. It needs to be very clear. It's also oftentimes about the institution. And so this is something that I learned coming from academia to this job, it was kind of a learning curve, is how to write about the institution, how to pitch, the institution and its expertise. Although I had written proposals during grad school and I even had successful proposals, it was more about the research study and not really about selling kind of an institution's expertise, right? So this is the kind of language that I had to learn as I started the job at AIR. Then in the contract and award and implementation stage, we do some writing in terms of like an inception report, which is where you lay out everything you're going to do. You go more in depth than the proposal stage to really fine tune your approach and, explain how you're going to get the data that you're going to get and what you're going to analyze, right? We also develop data collection instruments, which on the qualitative side include, for instance, the interview guides that you're going to use with the different people you're going to interview. And that's really important also moment for writing, because you need to write very clearly. You need to write high quality kind of data collection instruments that are also very like consistent and systematic, so that you get the right information in order to answer the research questions for the study. And so, it's really important to sort of be systematic and very intentional with the writing that you do, because that will determine the quality of data that you'll get. Then the reporting and dissemination stage is very writing intensive. This is when we do, I think, most of the writing. So this is when we're analyzing data. We are writing research reports, which can be quite long, 50, 60 pages or more. There's a lot of data coming from this. I mean, I deal with more data than I would, I think, ever if I was in academia just doing research, compared to, an anthropologist who's just doing their own fieldwork by themselves. It's just usually what anthropologists do. I just, I'm in several projects at the same time. I have a lot of data, that I am responsible for analyzing. Of course, we work in teams, so we split all of this up across teams. I think collaborating in teams was also something that, coming from an anthropology background, I learned so much about at AIR, because we're always working in a team, we're always dividing up tasks, and so you really learn how to be efficient in that way. And then aside from the research reports, and I'll talk a little bit more about reporting in a slide going forward, but we also develop dissemination materials, which can include like PowerPoint presentations that we give to government stakeholders and other stakeholders, and then also policy briefs. This is a common request that we get, to sort of distill the report into its most important points, so that policymakers can sort of look through them very quickly. In terms of writing in the research and evaluation world, I noticed a big difference between writing for academic audiences and writing for policymakers. So policymakers are super busy. They don't have time to read long reports, so you have to be very structured. They don't like jargon, so you can't use too much of that either. And policymakers often have these conflicting sources of information, so you need to present information clearly and concisely without long explanations. You need to put the key points first, so you often, the importance of topic sentences like cannot be overstated, right? You need to be able to use topic sentences in every paragraph, so that, people who are just skimming what you're writing can get what you're saying. And you also need to keep the materials short, easy to read, and make them look attractive, so that people will be drawn to reading them. Not to say that, academic writing isn't clear, but, it just needs to be a lot clearer. It needs to be really, really, really clear when you're writing for policymakers who are super busy people, and they need to make decisions quickly, and they need to be convinced quickly. If you're, using data to kind of inform policymaking, right? You really want your point to come across clearly. Also, something else I was going to mention regarding reports is that we need to respond to different clients' reporting and evaluation standards. So each client may have a different type of standard or rubric that they use to be able to assess the quality of reports, but UNICEF in particular uses something called the Global Evaluation Reports Oversight System, or GEROS. And each report that we submit to UNICEF, this is their quality assessment system. Each report that we submit to them, we get feedback from the technical team, or the people who are running the program, right? And they're the people who know all the details about the program, and they're the people who need to understand our points and everything. But in addition to that, we also get feedback from external reviewer, an external firm that does a quality assessment for UNICEF. And they look for different criteria just in general to make sure that the report is well structured and clear. And so we need to pass both of those. We need to address, to be able to get, I think, a satisfactory rating on the GEROS template, and then the quality assessment system. And then we also need to, of course, address the technical team's comments about our report. So I wanted to show you a quick example of what this GERO template looks like, so you could see the kinds of things that they rate us on. Can everyone see the screen, the Excel spreadsheet? Yes? Okay. So I'll just quickly, I'm going to make it bigger so that you could see better. There's different, this is like a blank, get rid of this thing, just a second. This is a blank template that they will fill in with all of, the ratings that they're giving. But essentially, they have different categories that they're going to look at. Some of them are really straightforward, like, is the executive summary, which is like the summary of the report that comes in the front of it. Is it 5 pages? Does it include all of these elements that they list, right? Does it include, information that's all included in the report? But then they have specific things like the object of the evaluation and the context of the intervention, things that UNICEF in particular looks for. But they also have things on the structure of writing, like, is the purpose of the evaluation clearly described? I think I wanted to move to the findings to show you more of that. Just a second. Yes, in terms of the findings, do they address all the evaluation objectives and scope? So again, the need to be really systematic and to like have a clear relationship and lineup and correspondence between the evaluation objectives and questions, research questions, and like the findings that you're reporting on. Also, whether the findings are based on the best available, data and accurate analysis, right? They're like kind of judging the quality of your research, or sometimes how you present your research, because oftentimes the commentary is not that we didn't do what we were supposed to do, right? When we're addressing feedback, it's often that we didn't describe it enough or clearly enough for the external reviewer to be able to understand what we did. So in that sense, writing clearly and having all of these elements in mind is really important, right? So they have all, a bunch of criteria on the internal coherence of the evaluation. Did the conclusions present an objective overall assessment of the intervention? And all of these criteria about how recommendations, whether they're well grounded in the evaluation, and they have a bunch of subcategories related to that. But it really, here we have this this criteria. Is the report logically structured, right? Is the structure easy to navigate? All the elements that should be included. And so it's really about organization. It's really about writing clearly. I think that is a huge part of the job that we have to consistently exercise in order to be able to get good ratings on these quality checks, for example. Okay. I also wanted to briefly show you an example of a policy brief that this is the kind of material, just a second, because it opened here on the other page. This is the kind of writing material or research product that is a shorter version of the report with just the essential findings. Let me see if I can do this. So you can see that it sort of has, let me try to example. Okay, there we go. So it has pictures, right? It's kind of a, it draws your attention. This is in particular a policy brief of a study on technology-aided instruction programs in rural Zambia. And this is a midline evaluation. So, partway through the intervention, what is it telling us about how well it's working and what kind of effects or impacts it's having? So you can tell that, it's very, the text is minimal. It shows you just the the minimal information you need to know to understand, the problem, what the context is, what the program is, so here we have an introduction with basically the issue at hand, right? The context, what are we talking about? Why does this intervention exist? What the intervention is about here in this area, what the study was about, in very, few words, right? Like what, where, when, how, why type of thing. This is also about the evaluation in general. Then talking about the methodology as briefly as possible. And basically the findings are, this part here that has some of the quantitative findings on the outcomes and improvement of the students in different categories or indicators, and then also some of the qualitative findings here and ending with next steps. So this is essentially like a 4-page document that really summarizes and distills the report down to its most important points for someone like a policymaker who's considering, using technology-assisted education or programming to understand like what were the findings of the study and what do they tell us about this particular intervention and how effective it was found to be, and what lessons are we learning from this. Okay. I also wanted to go briefly through an example of a project, an evaluation that we're currently conducting that connects to the Sustainable Development Goals. So my understanding is that the class, Dr. Cohen's class, is one of the themes that you were discussing is the Sustainable Development Goals. And it so happens that I'm leading an evaluation on a program that is funded by the SDG Fund. And it is basically trying to address several SDGs at once. So the program is, the study is called Formative Evaluation of the Integrated Social Protection Program in Madagascar. And this program is implemented by several UN agencies, including UNICEF, World Food Program, UNFPA, ILO, and in collaboration with the government of Madagascar. And it's partly funded by this SDG fund, which is basically this coordination mechanism for the UN to fund projects that contribute to achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. The program seeks to provide a holistic package of interventions, including social protection interventions, agricultural insurance, health insurance, and gender-based violence prevention in the south of Madagascar, which is one of the poorest regions of Madagascar that is really affected by drought and other sort of climate change related issues, as well as cyclones too. Also, this program, so one of the areas of this program, one of the activities of the program is this holistic package so that people can receive, all these different interventions in the area at once. And then also there's an institutional strengthening component for the social protection system. So they're seeking to like establish a referral system so that people can be referred to different services, and also to just have a vision and a plan to develop the social protection system in a way that's more sensitive to people living with disabilities. So there's a specific focus on disabilities throughout this project. I just wanted to give you a sense of like all the different SDGs or Sustainable Development Goals that this project or this program is aligned with. You can see here that it contributes to many different ones, right? Including, reducing poverty, implementing nationally appropriate social protection systems, increasing agricultural productivity and income. So it has all of these different components that can contribute to different sustainable development goals, to the achievement of different sustainable development goals. And then this is an overview of our approach to this evaluation. So how are we going to evaluate the project or the program? So the first thing I should say is that formative evaluation means that you're evaluating something while it's still being carried out with the intent to inform the program stakeholders so that they can tweak the program and improve the program based on what you're learning from the study, right? So it's supposed to be something that's really starting at the initial stages of the program so that you have the time to inform the program, right, until the end. So here you can see on the timeline here that we have different activities related to data collection throughout the life of the evaluation. So we did a stakeholder mapping, which is like a participatory exercise where we're looking at all the different stakeholders and understanding what the landscape is like in terms of the organizations involved and what are the issues, right? Who we should talk to, etc. We also have both baseline and endline rounds of data collection so that we are, producing an initial findings report at baseline to give them information about what's working, what's not working, and other kinds of learnings so that they have time to sort of adapt the program before. We're not just coming and telling them at the end, oh, this is what went wrong. Like the idea is to try to, as they say, like taste the soup while you're still cooking so that you can sort of adjust, right, before it's done. And then we also have a quantitative component, which consists of 3 rounds of monitoring. And, this is going to happen kind of throughout the project. So this is how we're trying to, give them, collect data throughout the life of the project to give them information and findings so that they can act on those to improve the program. And just so you have an idea of the kind of data collection that we do, in this case, we're doing key informant interviews, which are usually interviews with stakeholders like implementers or representatives of different government like ministries or different organizations. We're doing in-depth interviews with beneficiaries and with service providers in the communities where, so the communities where this is being implemented are here in the light blue. This is the district of Madagascar where the program is happening. And these dots here are the different communes, or, this is kind of like a local community type unit where the program is being implemented. We also do focus group discussions a lot, so with beneficiaries. So that's what we're doing in this project as well. Okay. I wanted to sort of talk at the end now about skills for international development work. So I gave you kind of an idea of the work that I do and the work that AIR does and the kinds of writing that we do. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about, just skills as a way to summarize it, I guess, the skills that are important for this world of international development and also what we look for when we're hiring. So I think for research, so I'm going to speak from the standpoint of research and evaluation specifically, because that's my experience. Of course, experience in research is very important. So, we're looking when someone has like training in research methods, it's important, but also fieldwork experience, especially related to topics around international development, is really highly valued. So when you look at someone's CV and they've collected data, they've done fieldwork in different places around the world, it's a great sign for us because it shows us that this person can pull this off, has experience doing that, because that's part of our job as well, right? If you're more in the technical assistance kind of pathway, implementation experience is also valuable, right? Like experience implementing development programs or providing technical assistance, like working for NGOs, can be very important. In terms of writing experience, I think across the board, this is really something that we look for, including like we request writing samples when we're hiring people for that reason. But for instance, looking at experience with proposals is great. Also, of course, writing research reports or any sort of academic paper is good. And then also like experiences with policy briefs or communication materials that are more in short form is also great, because this is also something that we are always trying to improve on communication with different kinds of stakeholders, in policy briefs or in shorter forms. It's also data visualization skills is also great. So this is also something that we look for when we are, preparing PowerPoint presentations, preparing reports. How can we best show, the data that we have, or communicate the idea that we're trying to get at with our data? And so data visualization skills are in super high demand. Something else I wanted to mention is that foreign language skills are also very valuable. As I mentioned, I use French and Portuguese regularly because I work with Madagascar, I work with Mozambique, I work in different contexts where, like in sub-Saharan Africa, like if you work in the countries that were colonized by the British, you can get away with English pretty easily, right? But in other places like Francophone Africa or Lusophone Africa, colonized by the Portuguese, if you don't speak French or Portuguese, you can't easily communicate with government stakeholders or even sometimes with the international development community in those places. So those are languages that are very useful. Also, Arabic is something I always see people looking for. Spanish, of course, is also in high demand. And if you happen to speak different local languages around the world, by local I mean like not the colonizer language, I should say, that is also a huge asset, of course. We often don't have those skills, but for those of you who are in parts of the world where that would apply to you, that's a great skill to have as well. I also wanted to share just some information about job searching and international development. So related to positions at AIR, I think AIR has a summer internship program. I don't think that the internships are in international development specifically. I don't think we've had interns in our department as long as I've been there, but I do know that for other like departments in the domestic space, there are a lot of interns every summer. So that's something to keep an eye out, if you're interested in getting some hands-on experience with working with an organization like AIR. And I think AIR is an organization where, you can potentially like start in one unit and move to the other. We do have colleagues who've done that. Also, we have positions at not necessarily open right now, but we do have people working at the research associate level, which requires an MA. And then their AIR has the research assistant level positions, which require only a bachelor's, but we don't have research assistants in the international development division. We only have research associates, which require an MA level. But again, research assistants, you might find an area that, you're excited about at a place like AIR, even if it's not international development. I wanted to show you just the link to openings at AIR in case you're interested. Again, I don't think we have openings right now in the international development team, unless I'm mistaken, but this is the site where you could get sort of all of the available positions. Please note that some of these are based for projects and things like that, like this one, for example. So they're like, you need to be based in Mozambique to be able to apply to that one. So there's some that might not apply to you, but it's worth taking a look. And then I wanted to share with you this resource that was shared with a colleague who was recently on the job market, which is just a list of the best international development job search websites. When it comes to the point, if you want to look for jobs in this field, like this is just an aggregate of kind of all of the different jobs, job websites that are the most useful. And I don't know if I see here, but DevX is one that I've heard is also good in case it's not. Oh, here it is. Okay, great. Yep. And we can share these links, via chat or email too, if it's not easily accessible to you after the presentation. But that's all I had for today. So I wanted to leave time for discussion and to hear your questions.
Thank you so much, Paula. That was awesome. Really informative and interesting to hear all about what you do and the way AIR works in conducting research and evaluations. So like Paula said, we have time for questions. So anyone who is online can use the chat. Anyone who is in the classroom could raise their hand and ask a question.
And thank you in advance. I'm not in advance. Thank you after the fact. I only now am seeing the chat and all of the explanations about the different acronyms and terms. So thanks for everyone and also the links to the poll. So thanks people for posting things on the chat. Okay. So I see one question here. How many projects do you work on at a time? How long do these projects usually last? How does co-authoring work? How do you often divide the work and writing together? Do you get publishing credit for the work that you do? Does it matter or not? And what is your work-life balance? Okay, well, lots of questions here. So all very important questions. How many projects? I think I'm working now maybe on like 8 different projects. It can be a lot. Projects have different timelines. So it is kind of hard to negotiate that. I feel like with COVID, there's been sort of a stacking of projects. Like there was a time when we couldn't go to the field. I mean, we still can't, but when our partners couldn't go to the field. So then when it opened up, like everything happened at the same time. So there's a lot going on. But I feel like when you get to a certain point, you're working a lot at the same time. It's kind of, a challenge to manage, but it's also very exciting because you really get to be out there. You get to work on different topics. So I didn't have the topical experience on, for instance, cash transfers when I started, but because of my methodological experience, I was able to work on those projects. And now, I have all this cash transfer experience. So that's great. How long do the projects usually last? It varies a lot. Our shorter projects are like 6 months, which is really short, I feel. We're trying now for larger projects that are, at least a couple of years. And so because the length also determines the size of the budget, so we're kind of aiming towards a little slightly bigger budget. There are some projects that are like 5 years, and that's great because then you have sort of the certainty of the same project and you have the time to sort of deepen your analysis and your research. In terms of co-authoring, like writing reports, everyone who worked on the report gets named in the report. I don't, it depends on how, like, I feel like usually some studies have like PIs or principal investigators, and I feel like their name comes first usually, but I've also seen a lot of examples where it's just alphabetical order. So you could be like a research associate, but your name comes first or something like that, right? It's often more democratic in that way, in that, your name as a research assistant is in every proposal that, every report that you contribute to. But it doesn't count for publications in the same way. Like, I guess I have a list of the reports that I worked on as, technical reports, but it doesn't have, I think, the same weight as academic publications, right? So I think something that also in our field we try to do is as much as possible to publish, right, in journals, the findings of our study, though that can also be determined also by the client, because technically the studies that we do belong to the client. So we kind of need the client's permission to publish, and some clients want us to publish, right? But depending on the project, sometimes it's like, oh, something that's internal to an organization, right? We're not going to publish those findings, right? Because they're not really outward facing, they're inward facing. And then working and writing and how to divide. I mean, I feel like those are just part of the same thing for us, right? The main activity that we're doing with the data that we're collecting is to putting together research reports, right? So once we have the data in, then we get together and sort of figure out how we're going to structure the report writing process and analysis. And that's basically what our job is at that point. So there isn't really a division between like work and writing. But I'm not sure if I understood the question fully. Publishing credit, I already discussed that. What is your work-life balance like? This is a tough one. I feel like it's really ebbs and flows because of this kind of different projects and different timelines. So you could have a week when like you have 2-3 reports due, and that's like not a very nice week. But then you could also have other weeks where, there's not a big thing going on, and it's much, I mean, AIR is super laid back. I mean, I work fully remotely. I think at the research associate level, I don't know if you can start remotely. I think some people have during COVID, but I don't know what it's going to be like in the future. But it tends to be much, super relaxed. It's basically, whether you can just get the work done. It's not really micromanaging at all. And in terms of salary, I mean, it's a nonprofit job, right? So I don't know if the salaries are, like tech industry salaries, but they're decent, I think, compared to other options. I mean, I think you should keep in mind the nonprofit world as your sort of parameter for that. Suggestions on getting project-based or consulting work to continue building research skills in international development. I mean, not quite sure about this one. So my experience has been working for AIR, which is an organization that is in the business of getting this work, right? If you're, I'm not sure if you're looking for like short-term work on this, like consulting work as like a temporary consultant, I would imagine they would need to have some sort of expertise to do that, right? Like you would need to have experience in a particular topic to be able to get those gigs. I know that like in the World Bank, for example, you need to do consulting short-term gigs several times before you're hired for a full position. So that's like a strategy that people have. So I would suggest that if you can build out your skills while you're in school, like getting involved in research like now, or some sort of implementation work now, or even helping with implementation work, even if it's from a distance, that can put you in a better position to be able to get those kinds of consulting gigs in the future. I think the main hurdle is like getting that initial experience, right? So whatever you can do to get that, I think is helpful. Okay, writing samples, and I don't know if they're questions in the room? I'm just reading the questions in the chat. Should we also do a round robin in the room? I don't know.
That would be great. There are some hands here.
Okay, sorry, I wasn't looking at the room.
That's okay.
All right, so let's pause on the chat questions a bit and do a round robin in the room.
All right, Masa, you want to go ahead?
Am I loud enough?
I don't know. Try.
Hello.
Can you hear
Hi.
her?
Hi. Okay, so earlier you mentioned that like when it comes to interventions with AR, you use a collaborating, learning, and adapting approach. Can you explain a little bit more about that? Because that sounds like really interesting. Like, is it more so like communicating with the community before you create those interventions, or is it more so like, is it dialogue based? Could you just like explain a little bit more about that, please? Thank you.
Sure. So, I mean, I don't know if I am the best person to answer that question because I haven't worked on CLA very much yet, but I think it's basically, I don't know if it's necessarily focused on the community as much. I think it's focused on the different stakeholders involved in the project. I mean, I guess that could include the beneficiaries of the program itself, but not necessarily the community at large, I think. But it's basically design, in my understanding, it's designing an intervention with like a built-in mechanism to collaborate between different stakeholders, to collect data on the implementation and to reflect on that and on lessons learned to improve the program. So I think it's an approach that kind of looks like at programs as a system that you need to sort of build in these mechanisms and opportunities to come together and reflect, like on the one hand, collect data on what's going on, like monitoring, like how many teachers are being trained, what are teachers, how do they feel about the training, do they think it's effective, you know, how many kits are being distributed, like these very straightforward things. But you kind of design it so that you have periodic data collection on those monitoring and data collection on the process. And then you kind of come together at periodic points with different stakeholders that might not even talk to each other normally, right? To learn from each other and to find out a way forward so that you can incorporate those learnings into the practices of the program. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yep. Anyone else in the room?
So they also submitted some questions before your talk.
Okay.
And so I'm gonna ask one of those unless someone else has a question sparked from the talk. And so one of the questions they asked is, what has been one of the most effective policy briefs or program evaluations you've written or assisted with? It seems like when a program is created and utilized within a community and the resources assist, it's always reflective to analyze how effective or useful it was for that specific community or environment. So how do you go about that?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't know if I have a super specific example in mind. I think one of the most rewarding moments I had so far was the moment where I showed you the picture where I'm presenting to like the government and civil society stakeholders in Zambia about traditional parenting, where it was really a study for them to understand like what are traditional parenting practices in Zambia. And the nice thing is that they were going to use these findings to design so UNICEF was going to use these findings to design programming. So that's, I think, you know, when stakeholders can use the findings from your study, from the study that you contributed to design programs that are, you know, better fit contextually, right, for the places where these interventions are being carried out, it's really rewarding, right? Because you can see that you're generating data that is then used to inform programming, which is the ultimate goal, right? At least for me, of what I'm doing. I think another recent example too, we're evaluating a pilot. We often evaluate pilot programs, and the results then are used to inform the expansion of the program. So we're evaluating a cash transfer program in Mozambique, and the government is going to expand the program to different it's being implemented in this particular province and they're going to expand it to other provinces. So the findings that we're presenting to them, we have lessons learned, we have recommendations for when they expand, what should they do to ensure that women aren't left out of the program, to ensure that beneficiaries can adequately understand, the processes that are put in place, people who are involved with like child protection services and all of that. So I think that that's like my understanding of like having a successful study is when you can tell that the findings are understood by the government stakeholders and they're actually being used to inform future programming, especially when it's kind of government run and owned, because it suggests that there's sort of sustainability, more sustainability in the long run.
It is 2:25, and so our class is over, and I believe some of my students have to run. So we are going to wrap up here and just say thank you so much, Paula, for this presentation and for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, and thank you to everyone who joined us. Have a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too. Bye.